Hello, my name is Evan Morier, and this is my profile in practice. This is an opportunity for me to express to you how best I teach in the classroom and what points that I like to emphasize when I'm teaching science in a secondary education classroom. I, among many other teachers, like to set up a supportive and nurturing environment that is very risk-free for students to be able to communicate their ideas about science effectively. Um, One of my goals as a teacher is to give students the skills they need to be able to communicate their ideas on science effectively, using the content knowledge effectively, and to be able to use the vocabulary that we're learning in class and apply it to new situations, new contexts. The best way that I've found to inform my later lessons and to make the lessons adhere to student interests and cultural backgrounds is through whole group discussions. Given the first 2 weeks of class, many students come in that you have never seen before, and it's very important to learn as much as you possibly can about those students. So, for what I do is I offer them the opportunity to observe a natural phenomenon, and I have them talk about it and try to explain what they're seeing. They don't have the content knowledge yet or the vocabulary to explain it effectively. However, giving students the opportunity to be inquisitive about natural phenomenon is essentially the nature of science. Asking questions, for instance, and trying to answer each other's questions is very important for students to develop their ability to communicate scientific ideas. I like to teach through inquiry-based learning, and one of my goals is to have students come to conclusions for themselves. It's very important for students to have a level of automaticity where they're doing it for themselves. They're learning for themselves, and they're asking questions and seeking out the information to answer those questions for themselves. I try to do this through my laboratory activities and my lecture activities, where I scaffold the questions to go from broad understanding to specific understanding. And I help to guide them into making those conclusions for themselves. And so, for instance, on a lab where we're looking into enzymatic activities of proteins, students are breaking toothpicks based on how they think that enzyme may be working in various pHs and temperatures. Preceding this lab, we talked about proteins, yes, and the structures of proteins on a broad level, and then now we're going into more of the specifics of how proteins function. The questions also follow this scaffolded broad to specific instruction in asking students, what did you observe? How does your observations compare to your predictions? Were your predictions correct? And eventually moving into, what are the implications of this? What about your own body? Where would this particular enzyme work in comparison to this enzyme? What are the pH levels differ from your stomach and your intestines? Would pepsin work in your intestines? All of these questions students are answering for themselves, and with a little bit of guided practice from me, I feel like the best way to teach science literacy is through having students writing out their answers. So I like to use a lot of open-ended questions where students are given the opportunity to express their ideas in any way that they want to. I often offer them the opportunity to draw what they want to express their understanding, and I also offer them an opportunity to verbally express their understanding to me, both formally and informally through whole group discussions. Moving back to more of my goals, Scientific literacy is very important for me. I feel having the skill set necessary to tackle new scientific literature is extremely important, especially in the world that we live in today. Students should be able to go out into the world and hear and observe people talking about science and to make conclusions for themselves or to have an opinion about what they believe is correct and what's not correct, and to be able to communicate those ideas effectively. And so my goal is for students to have the skills necessary to do that effectively. The best way for me to do this when I was growing up is through prefix and suffix understanding, where you take a word, like let's say for biology, you take the prefix bio and the suffix logi, and you can define it that way, where bio, the prefix, meaning life, and logi, the suffix, meaning study of. Archaeology, for instance, again, logi, a student can understand that logi means study of. And they may not know the prefix, however, but they know that it's a study of something. And that's a start in comparison to not knowing what that word means at all. And many of the terms in biology, many of the terms in science are very closely related to each other. And having the simple prefix and suffix understanding is imperative to tackling new scientific vocabulary, and to be able to read a scientific text and try to define a word that they don't know simply by breaking it into its prefix and suffix, using the context surrounding that word to try to define it. All of these skills are very important in science, and my goal is to emphasize that. I have tried doing this through students reading an article, a scientific article, and for me, first modeling through a read aloud how to read through it, how to underline and circle words you may not know or important words, and to try to define it. And I would model for them how to do that. And then I gave them an opportunity to do it for themselves. I gave them some guided practice where I observed and led them through a couple paragraphs, and then I gave them independent practice to do it for themselves. And that's honestly how I transitioned from understanding that there's such things called proteins and then going into enzymes and figuring that out simply from reading a scientific article. I felt added some relevance and some real world implications for what they were currently learning. Students in my classroom are not necessarily used to how I teach. However, I feel that using things such as models like this for teaching the variations of amino acids found in a protein is very important. Students would make something like this, and then we would apply what we've learned previously about hydrophobic interactions and such like that. And also, I like students to use whiteboards, such as these boogie boards, which are, I'm sorry, it's upside down. And students can simply write on it, clear it, and then they can do whatever they want again. Using simple blackboards like this is important for me to formally assess student understanding of what we're currently talking about. So putting up on the board, for instance, a question and having them answer it on the little whiteboards. It's very low risk, and I can walk around and I can assess student understanding of the concept that we're currently touching upon. So just to reiterate, I believe using models is very important in class, something physical, something tangible that students are able to manipulate, and it's very hands-on for them. Using technology in the classroom any way that I possibly can, such as using a document reader to model for the students how to analyze a scientific article. And also having students develop their own style in how to communicate their scientific ideas is very important, where students are able to tackle any new vocabulary word that they come across, and to be able to communicate their ideas with peers and with adults. And I feel like that's very relevant in today's society, where technology and science is so integrated into our lives that to be able to talk about it in a cohesive and effective manner is very important for instilling student confidence in their own abilities and their ability to communicate scientific ideas. So all of these goals I hope to employ when I am when I have my own classroom, and I hope that all of my students leave my class with more of an understanding of science and can communicate that understanding with others effectively, and to hopefully reach other students and to inspire a new, young, youthful generation of scientists who can solve all the problems that we're seeing today. So that's extremely important for me, for students to be able to communicate their ideas and to inspire others around them and to feel passionate about what they're doing. And I feel like that's done best through science education. Thank you.